In 47 blistering seconds on live TV, Justice Samuel Alito slammed his fist, called Jasmine Crockett a fake lawyer before 12 million Americans. Gas tore through the chamber, cameras locked on her unflinching stare. What did she do next that shook the nation and left Alito speechless? It was a cold, gray morning in Washington, D.C., the kind that makes the whole city feel slower. But inside Jasmine Crockett's office, the air was electric. On her desk lay a thick stack of reports, each page revealing trips paid for by billionaires, luxury gifts, and connections that weren't supposed to exist. At the center of it all was the Supreme Court. Jasmine turned page after page, her disbelief tightening into anger. This wasn't rumor. This was proof in black and white. Her aide, sitting across the room, finally broke the silence. If you go after Alito, it's not just politics, it's war. She didn't blink. Leaning back in her chair, she let out a slow breath. Then we fight with the truth, she said, her voice calm but sharp. The aide's eyes flicked toward the Capitol dome outside, as if to remind her what was at stake. But Jasmine's mind was already racing. Who leaked these reports? How deep did this go? And how long before Alito realized she was coming for him? Well, she picked up the phone, dialing a number she'd kept for months. "It's time," she said when the line picked up. "Set the hearing." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, the city's hum swallowing them whole. Inside, the camera in your mind lingers on her steady eyes. And then just above a whisper, she said, "They won't silence me." What happens when truth collides with the most powerful judge in America? Jasmine leaned back, phone still warm in her hand, mind drifting to the cracked sidewalks of her Texas hometown. The heat, the voices, and the endless fights for fairness that always seemed to lose. She remembered a man taken away in handcuffs for a crime he didn't commit, and her mother's quiet answer when she asked why no one stopped it. Because the people who could chose not to. From that day, Jasmine swore she'd never be one of them. But the man she was about to face came from a different world entirely. Samuel Alito, Ivy League polished, cloaked in the lifetime armor of a Supreme Court justice, a man whose name carried more weight in courtrooms than the truth itself. For decades, he'd been untouchable, shielded by prestige, power, and a system built to protect him. And now it was her word and the voices of the people she represented against all of that. The distrust in America's institutions had never been higher, and millions were watching to see if she could crack the marble facade of the court. The stakes weren't just her career. They were the hope of every community that had been ignored for generations. Why? The question wasn't if it would be a fight. It was simple. Can a lone congresswoman pierce the armor of the Supreme Court? The next morning, Jasmine stepped up to the podium. The room was packed, reporters shoulder to shoulder, cameras clicking like gunfire. She gripped the sides and steadying herself, eyes sweeping over the crowd. Then she said it, clear and direct. "Tomorrow I will question Justice Samuel Alito in a live hearing on judicial ethics." The words landed like a thunderclap. Her supporters in the back erupted in cheers, chanting her name. But at the front, a few faces twisted in skepticism. Murmurs about career suicide and picking the wrong fight. The tension in the room crackled, every reaction feeding the storm. By evening, the internet had caught fire. Justice for All was climbing into the top trend. Videos of her speech racking up millions of views in hours. Supporters called her fearless. Critics called her reckless. Every news outlet had her face on screen, some praising, some predicting her downfall. That night, alone in her office, Jasmine stared out at the Capitol lights. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by the weight of what tomorrow might bring. She knew what was at stake, her reputation, her safety, maybe even her future in politics. But she also knew why she was doing it, for every voice that had been ignored. On the late-night news, a TV host's voice cut through. Tomorrow's hearing may rewrite the rules, or break careers. The camera in your mind closes in on Jasmine's face, calm but unblinking. The question now, is Jasmine ready for the political firestorm that's about to hit? The committee room was packed to the walls. Cameras lined the back like a firing squad, their red lights blinking. Every seat was filled, senators, aides, reporters, all waiting for the moment the first shot would be fired. Jasmine sat tall, microphone in front of her, hands folded, eyes fixed on Samuel Alito. She cleared her throat, the murmur in the room falling silent. "Justice Alito," she began, "can you explain why several undisclosed luxury trips and gifts appear in records tied to your name?" The question hung in the air, sharp and heavy. Across from her, Alito leaned back slightly, a polite smile tugging at his lips. "These allegations," he said, his voice measured, "are exaggerated." The words were smooth, practiced, the kind of tone meant to dismiss without engaging. A few heads in the room nodded quietly. Others scribbled notes furiously. But the air was shifting, like everyone could sense the current just below the surface. Cut to living rooms across America. A veteran in Kansas leaned forward in his recliner. A teacher in Detroit turned up the volume. A group of young activists huddled around a laptop in California, eyes glued to the live stream. They weren't just watching a hearing, they were watching a fight unfold in real time. Back in the room, Jasmine's jaw tightened. She could let his answer slide, play it safe, keep the exchange civil. Or she could call his bluff and change the course of the hearing right here, right now. The only question was, would Jasmine play it safe or throw the first punch? And outside, somewhere in the shadows of Washington, an anonymous source had just sent her a single photograph. Something that, if real, could shake the Supreme Court to its core. Jasmine didn't blink. She slid a folder across the table, the papers inside landing with a dull thud. "Then perhaps," she said evenly, "you can explain these flight records, the dates, the destinations, and the names of the benefactors." Her words were precise, but the tension in the room was anything but calm. Alito's smile thinned. He leaned forward, microphone catching the sharp edge in his voice. "You are a fake lawyer," he snapped. "Stop pretending you understand the Constitution better than this court." The words cut through the chamber like glass shattering. A collective gasp rolled through the room. Reporters' heads jerked up. Pens froze mid-sentence. The sound of camera shutters fired like gunshots. On social media, clips were already uploading. Captions screaming, "Alito attacks Crockett," as hashtags began to swarm. Jasmine didn't flinch. She let the silence stretch, the weight of his insult hanging in the air. Then slowly, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn copy of the Constitution. Her thumb flipped through the pages until she stopped, eyes still locked on him. "Article 3, she read aloud, her voice steady. "Can you point to a single line here that places a justice of the Supreme Court above ethical oversight?" She slid the open booklet toward him, the challenge hanging in the air like a drawn blade. All eyes swung back to Alito. Would he step into the trap or retreat into the safety of legal jargon? Alito glanced down at the booklet but didn't touch it. "Congresswoman, constitutional interpretation is," he began, voice smooth but faltering. Jasmine cut in, sharp and clean. "Yes or no, Justice Alito?" The words snapped through the chamber like a whip. He looked away, eyes drifting to his notes, then to the far wall, avoiding her stare. A low murmur rippled through the audience, the kind of sound that says everyone just noticed. The camera zoomed in on his face, catching the tight line of his jaw. Across the country, living rooms lit up with the same freeze frame. Justice Alito, silent under the weight of a simple question. On social media, screenshots of that exact moment flooded timelines, each one captioned with variations of, "This is what accountability looks like." In the back of the room, Jasmine's supporters leaned forward. One clenched a fist under the table, whispering to the other, "Got him!" Their eyes stayed locked on her, waiting for the next strike. But Jasmine didn't push further. Not yet. She simply held his gaze, letting the silence burn deeper, making every second feel heavier. For the first time in the hearing, it was Alito who looked cornered. The question hanging in the air now wasn't hers. It belonged to everyone watching. Had Jasmine just won the first battle? Or had she just made the most dangerous enemy of her career? By sunrise, the clip had already gone viral. Every major network opened with the same moment. Alito leaning forward, voice sharp. "You are a fake lawyer." Played in slow motion, rewound, analyzed from every angle. On split screens, pundits debated, was Alito out of line or was he defending the court? Cable news anchors dissected her expression frame by frame, while talk radio hosts took calls from furious listeners. Some hailed her as a hero, standing up to untouchable power. Others painted her as reckless, hungry for attention. The divide was as loud as it was immediate. By mid-morning, her office inbox was overflowing. Threatening emails laced with venom sat next to heartfelt letters from strangers, thanking her for finally saying what needed to be said. Boxes of handwritten notes arrived, some from veterans, others from teachers, each sharing why they were rooting for her. But in the quiet moments, the other side of it bled through. A voicemail from an unknown number warning her to watch her back. A social media post with her home address. Late at night, she caught herself glancing out the window more than once, just to check. Still, every time she thought about pulling back, she saw the faces from her district. The people who had trusted her to fight for them, even when it got ugly. Fear was real, yes. But so was the duty she carried. And the line between protecting her family and protecting the truth had never felt so thin. The question now was simple and heavy. Would she push forward, or let intimidation finally silence her? 2 days later, Jasmine stepped into the old brick community center on the south side of town. The walls were lined with black and white photos, marches, protests, faces that had stared down fire hoses and police dogs decades ago. Elders sat in folding chairs, their eyes following her every move, each one carrying memories of a fight they thought they'd won, only to see history creeping back. When one man, his voice weathered but steady, told her about the day he was forced off a bus because of the color of his skin. A woman spoke of being denied the right to vote until she was nearly 40. Their stories weren't in textbooks. They were in their bones. And now they wanted to know if Jasmine could stand against the same kind of power in a different disguise. In the back of the room, a group of young activists leaned forward. "Will you really take him down?" one asked, eyes searching hers. Jasmine didn't hesitate. "This fight isn't just mine. It's ours," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "If I fall, we all feel it. If I win, we all win." The room erupted in applause, the sound echoing against the old brick. Across town, in a paneled private office, Samuel Alito sat with political allies. Sure, the air smelled of expensive cigars and quiet calculation. They spoke in low voices about strategy, controlling the narrative, rallying their own media contacts, finding ways to make Jasmine the story instead of him. Every move was about survival, and he intended to play to win. Two worlds moving toward collision. The question wasn't if they would meet head-on. It was this: what happens when grassroots passion meets entrenched power? The hearing room felt different this time. Alito walked in with a stack of binders, his legal team in tow, their faces set like stone. He spoke first, unleashing a barrage of aggressive legal arguments, citing precedent after precedent. Each one delivered like a hammer strike meant to bury the conversation in technicalities. Jasmine let him finish, then calmly pushed a slim folder across the table. "I have something new," she said. The screen behind her flickered to life. Bank statements, travel invoices, and financial disclosures, each one linked directly to rulings in major cases. The room went dead silent for a heartbeat. Then gasps rippled through the chamber. Her voice was steady but sharp. "These transactions are not rumors. They're documented, and they connect decisions of this court to private financial benefits." She tapped the screen, each highlight drawing another murmur from the audience. The camera caught Alito's jaw clench as his hand gripped the edge of the table. "This is a circus," he snapped, his voice booming across the room. The outburst broke the tension like a thunderclap, reporters scrambling to capture every word. Jasmine didn't flinch. "No justice," she shot back, her tone cutting through the noise. "This is accountability." The silence that followed was heavier than before. Committee members exchanged glances, some shifting uncomfortably, others leaning forward. In living rooms across America, people were wondering the same thing. Would the committee dare to take action against a Supreme Court justice? Alito leaned forward, his voice cold but deliberate. "Congresswoman Crockett," he began, "your own career has been less than distinguished, short tenure, limited trial experience. Perhaps that's why you misunderstand the role of this court?" The words weren't just meant to rebut her. They were meant to strip her credibility bare, right there in front of the nation. Jasmine's eyes didn't leave his, But her mind flashed back in sharp fragments. At a cramped public defender's office stacked with case files. Late nights preparing for trials no one thought she could win. Standing beside clients who couldn't afford a suit, much less a fair shot at justice. She had fought for them anyway, and won more times than her critics would ever admit. The images came in quick bursts. A mother hugging her after charges against her son were dropped. A wrongfully accused veteran walking out of court a free man. Faces full of relief, gratitude, and belief that someone had finally listened. These weren't just cases. They were the reason she was in that chair today. When she spoke, her voice was steady but laced with fire. Justice Alito, I didn't come from a world where power was handed to me. I earned every inch of my career fighting for people your system forgot. Henry, so when I question you, it's not from ignorance, it's from experience. The room was silent, eyes darting between them, waiting for the next strike. The question now, could she keep her composure under such a personal attack, or would the anger finally break through? Chairman, I'd like to call 3 witnesses. The door opened, and a veteran in a pressed uniform stepped forward, followed by a single mother clutching a worn manila folder and a small business owner in a faded work shirt. Their footsteps echoed in the chamber, drawing every eye in the room. The veteran spoke first, voice steady but heavy. He told of losing his benefits after a ruling that favored a corporate contractor over service members, a decision tied to the same circles now under scrutiny. The single mother described how her custody battle was tilted by a judge with undisclosed financial interests. The business owner recounted losing his shop after a zoning decision traced back to political donations. The room fell into a thick, almost tangible silence. No crosstalk, no shuffling papers. Even the clicking cameras slowed. Across the table, Alito shifted in his seat, adjusting his pen, glancing toward his counsel. Small tells that the stories were landing harder than any legal argument could. And in living rooms across America, people weren't just watching a hearing anymore. They were watching neighbors, parents, and veterans stand against the highest court in the land. Social media lit up with clips of each testimony, captions reading, "This is why accountability matters." Jasmine sat back, letting the stories do what documents never could. The moral weight was crushing the room, pressing against Alito's polished composure. But the question lingered like a shadow. Would moral pressure be enough to break through the armor of judicial immunity? By the next morning, the numbers were impossible to ignore. Polls splashed across every news channel showed over 80% of Americans supporting stronger judicial ethics laws. Even voters who had never heard Jasmine's name before now knew exactly who she was and why she was standing toe-to-toe with a Supreme Court justice. Online, the tide had become a flood. No one above the Constitution burned across Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Videos of the veteran's voice breaking, the single mother's quiet resolve, and the small business owner's last words were being shared by millions. People weren't just watching, they were choosing sides. In the committee room, Samuel Alito sat rigid, eyes fixed ahead, his face an unreadable mask. But the still photographs told a different story. The tightness in his jaw, the slight slump in his shoulders. His authority was intact on paper, but in the court of public opinion, the shine had worn off. Jasmine stood, gathering her papers. She looked across the table at Alito, her voice low but certain. "This isn't the end, it's the beginning." The words weren't for him alone. They were for every camera in the room, every viewer at home, every citizen wondering if the system could still be held accountable. The room buzzed with whispers as she walked out, flashes from cameras chasing her to the hallway. And somewhere between the marble pillars and the swarm of microphones, one question began to grow louder than all the rest. What is her next move? The office was quiet, almost too quiet after the chaos of the past days. Afternoon light spilled across Jasmine's desk, casting long shadows over a pile of envelopes. She picked one up, shaky handwriting from Ohio, and read a few lines about a veteran who finally felt seen. Letter after letter told similar stories. A single mother in Georgia thanking her for speaking truth to power. A retired teacher in Montana saying she'd restored his faith in Congress. But between the folded pages of gratitude, there were also darker notes. Threats disguised as warnings. Promises that this will not end well. Her eyes felt heavy, the kind of tired no coffee could fix. She thought about the nights she'd barely slept, the constant hum of security briefings, the extra glance over her shoulder every time she stepped outside. The fight had cost her more than she'd imagined, and yet there was a quiet swell of gratitude beneath the fatigue. And for every threat, there were dozens of voices urging her forward. For every hour of lost sleep, there was a moment when someone's hope had been renewed. She ran her hand over the stack of letters, as if grounding herself in their weight. Outside, the city moved on like nothing had happened, but Jasmine knew nothing would be the same. She leaned back, eyes closed for a moment, feeling the weight of it all settle in her chest. And then the question crept in. After all this, was it worth it? Within a week, the ripple had turned into a wave. On the House floor, talk of a bipartisan bill for Supreme Court ethics reform moved from whispers to official drafting. For the first time in years, lawmakers from opposite sides of the aisle were in the same room, hammering out language to put justices under clear, enforceable rules. Jasmine walked into a closed-door meeting and was met with nods from colleagues who, weeks earlier, wouldn't have bet a dime on her chances. One leaned in and whispered, "You lit the match we've all been afraid to strike." Another told her she'd given the public something worth rallying behind. But she refused to take the credit alone. In every interview, every press statement, she named the people who had testified, the communities that had written letters, the voters who had refused to look away. "This isn't my win," she said. "It's ours." The words were simple, but in a building where egos often ruled, they landed differently. Cameras caught her walking out of the chamber, stacks of draft amendments in hand, a rare smile tugging at her lips. She knew the fight was far from over. A bill could stall, a vote could flip, public attention could fade. Still, for the first time in weeks, there was a sliver of daylight in the long tunnel ahead. The real question now was whether that momentum could survive the grind of Washington long enough to turn into real reform. The studio lights were bright, the kind that made every detail sharp. Jasmine sat across from the host, the cameras already rolling for a live national audience. She'd done interviews before, but this one felt different. It wasn't about her, it was about what came next. The host leaned in. "Congresswoman, after everything, what's your message to the American people?" She took a breath, eyes locking straight into the lens, as if speaking to every living room in the country. In America, justice is not a privilege. It's a promise. And that promise belongs to you. There was no script in her hands, no teleprompter feeding her lines, just conviction. She spoke about the veteran, the single mother, the small business owner, about how their courage had lit a fire that reached the halls of Congress. She reminded viewers that the fight for accountability didn't end with a hearing or a headline. Later that evening, at a packed town hall, her words echoed again. The crowd rose to their feet, applause rolling like a wave, the sound filling the old building until it seemed the walls themselves were listening. Faces in the crowd were lit not just by stage lights, but by something deeper: belief. As the noise swelled, she stepped back from the microphone, one last thought hanging in the air. Her voice softened, but carried to every corner of the room. What would you fight for if you knew you couldn't lose? The applause roared louder, but the question lingered, demanding an answer long after the lights faded. Justice is never simply given. It's upheld by those willing to pay the price to defend the truth. Jasmine's confrontation didn't just expose one powerful figure. It reminded us that every steadfast voice can reach the heart of an entire nation. When that moment comes for you, will you choose silence or let your voice become the flame that ignites hope in others? If this story stirred something in you, don't just move on. Stand with the truth. Stand with the people who refuse to be silenced. Like, share, and subscribe to First Shock, where power is challenged and justice has a voice. Tap the bell, because tomorrow's fight might need your voice. And tell us in the comments, if you were in Jasmine's seat, what would you say? This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and real people. All characters and dialogue are fictionalized for commentary and education. It is not intended to defame or mislead, but to inspire reflection and civic awareness. Thanks for watching.